Is Elden Ring Nightreign trash? To answer the question, I have to ask what you're looking for first. Because if you want another traditional Souls game with a focus on solo play, with multiplayer as a side mechanic, and with a gameplay emphasis on exploration and creating builds, then the answer is yes, this game will disappoint you immensely. On the other hand, if you want to try a multiplayer focused roguelike game, where the point is to grind as many levels as quickly as possible while also getting the best loot you can, like weapon and power-ups for your Nightfarer or hero, so then you can attempt to beat 3 mandatory bosses to clear an expedition or level, then this game is your jam. With this video, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of this game, because even though I've been enjoying the experiment so far, I do have some gripes I hope get addressed eventually, because I can see the potential in this style of game. Also, I've only beaten 1 expedition, so I've obviously have not beaten the game, but I've played enough of the game at this point to know if I think if it's fun or not, and to actually talk about it in a serious manner. With the intro done, let's talk about what I like, because I always like to start out with the positives. The first thing that I really like about Elden Ring Nightreign is the procedurally generated maps. I am a big sucker for just exploration in general, even if it's not all necessarily handcrafted, so I like the fact that every time I drop into an expedition, I don't always know what to expect, and that does, in my opinion at least, help freshen up the gameplay every single time. Because one of the issues I have with the original Elden Ring is I pretty much know where everything is at this point, so that kind of freshness is gone, and that hurts replayability even though that game is great. The next thing I really like about Elden Ring Nightreign is the Nightfarers, or what normal games call them, heroes. I think their abilities are interesting enough, and at least with the ones I've played and seen, there's enough Nightfarers to pretty much compensate every style of gameplay except for maybe stealth. Of course, I do prefer the classic Souls system of creating your own character and making your own build, but this alternative for a experimental asset flip is not bad. Another thing I've been enjoying about Elden Ring Nightreign is the roguelike elements. I like the idea that the difficulty of the game comes from the mandatory bosses, and if you've grinded enough levels and got enough loot. It's very different from normal Souls games where you can keep constantly trying over and over. And for a asset flip side game, I think it's a fun little experiment. The next thing I really enjoy about Elden Ring Nightreign is the fact that FromSoft took inspiration from Seamless Co-op mod that we see in Elden Ring and the other Souls games now, and they put that into Nightreign for the co-op game. And I hope we start seeing more stuff like this in the future, because it's a way better system than what the original Elden Ring and the Dark Souls games was doing. Another thing that I actually really love about Elden Ring Nightreign is I like the new movement mechanics. So like the jumping mechanics where you can basically wall hop, I enjoy that. I also love now that there is the sprint button, and then there's the haul butt button. So you don't have to like hold B and run around everywhere. You can just press the left thumbstick or whatever it is on keyboard and mouse, and you'll just be sprinting. I think it's a good quality of life improvement, and I hope other Souls games have that from now on, because it's way better than Torrent in my opinion. I also enjoy the new revive mechanic in Elden Ring Nightreign. I think it's cool. I like it better than the old Souls games where they just kind of died and you couldn't bring them back. It makes it more interactive. And my only real gripe is I wish the bar wouldn't fill back up after I got it down. Because sometimes, especially when it's a 3v1 against Cerberus, that can get kind of annoying. The last compliment I have for Elden Ring Nightreign is that I really love the roundtable hold, and I think it's the second best hub in the series. It's only behind Majula from Dark Souls 2. With the compliments done, I need to talk about the negatives, because this game does have some issues that I hope get fixed. The first issue I want to talk about is I think solo mode is balanced horribly, and I hope the next patch that is going to be released will fix this and just make it a way better experience. And I know it's not impossible to beat an expedition solo, but it's just not a fun experience, in my opinion, as someone who's tried it. The next thing about Elden Ring Nightreign I really don't like is that there's no crossplay in the multiplayer-focused game. I just think that's kind of stupid. And I also think it's kind of stupid that there's no game chat. It would just make communication in the game so much easier if all 3 of us could talk to each other instead of using pings, but it is what it is. I also think it's kind of dumb that there's no duo game mode. It's not a huge negative since you could still play with one other friend, you just have to wait for a random. But they should have really added a duo. I don't know what they were thinking there. And lastly, this is kind of a nitpick, but I do want stealth back. And if they do bring stealth back into Nightreign, I hope they add a ninja Nightfarer because that would be really cool. With pros and cons out of the way, I do have some suggestions for the game that I'm going to get into, and I'm not very confident in these, and I'd like to hear what other people think, because this is a new gameplay loop, and I'm not very experienced with roguelikes, so getting some fresh perspectives could help me make my own opinion better. My first suggestion for Elden Ring Nightreign is to make it to where once you reach the last expedition boss, you don't have to restart if you die. If the team gets wiped, you should just go back to the site of grace and be able to try as many times as it takes. I think this would make the game a bit more palatable for Souls fans, because they're used to, in the other Souls games, being able to try a boss as many times as they want. And I know with the other mandatory expedition bosses, you can't retry them once your team wipes. But I think that type of specific failure in the game comes from the fact that you're not a high enough level and you didn't get good enough gear. If you get to the end boss, I think you're pretty much leveled up and geared up to be successful. So letting them just try as many times as they want until they decide to quit, I think is a better strategy, and I think it would make Nightreign more liked. Another thing I think would help the game, at least in solo mode and maybe multiplayer mode, is if they made the expedition slower, or at least the first one slower. I think a lot of people are having troubles with the speed that the matches are, because they are pretty quick, especially when you face that first mandatory boss, and maybe slowing it down would be better for people. Now again, with these two suggestions, I'm not very confident in them, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with roguelike games, so if you guys got your own opinions, let me know, because I want to hear a different perspective on this. Now these next suggestions, I am way more confident in, because these are things I'd actually like added into the game. The first one is I'd like them to add an exploration mode more akin to a normal Souls game, so I can enjoy the content of Limvale without needing to hurry because of the death circle that slowly encloses the map. I think it'd be cool, and it could be like a reward for completing the expedition the normal way. Now my next two suggestions would immensely help with replayability, but I would love to see FromSoft lean more into procedural generation and add more bosses into the map pool. Of course, I've only done the first expedition, but I've heard some people complain about the variety of bosses, so it'd be nice for a DLC or a free update if they added more bosses from Dark Souls and from Elden Ring Scholar of the First Sin, or just Elden Ring. That way it'll up the replayability of the game because you'll have more variety in boss fights and in just normal enemy variety. And just like what FromSoft did with Sekiro, they need to add a boss gauntlet and replay system, because it's crazy that you have to go through the entire expedition again just to fight Cerberus. I fought him once, I should be able to now fight him as many times as I want without having to go through the expedition. Now, let me say, just for the record, I know I've been making anti-FromSoft videos recently, but honestly, I just made them for fun. The truth is, I'm a big fan of FromSoft games, and if I wasn't a fan, my first Elden Ring video wouldn't be me beating Melania at level 1. So with that little confession out of the way, what do you guys think of Nightreign? Is it trash? FromSlop? A cash grab? Or is it just a fun little asset flip? And on my last negative FromSoft video, I had a lot of comments agreeing with me after the game released, and it was just funny to see a video that got a lot of hate just get a lot of love after the fact. Even if I didn't necessarily agree with them, I was tickled by the situation. Now make sure to like the video, subscribe, and...
I'm sorry, sir. It's time for you to leave.